This video will be covering the second half of the Hindu beliefs AQA Religious Studies 8 specification. So particularly focusing on this second half of the specification, the beliefs about the nature of human life. And we're going to cover all of these issues. So we're going to have a look at the idea of Atman, have a look at the cycle of birth and death, the idea of free will and suffering, the aims of life, and then have a look at the idea of Dharma too. Let's begin by having a look at this idea of Atman and life after death. So within Hinduism, there is this concept of Atman. For want of a better translation, it's similar to the idea of a soul. And the idea is that it's your true self, your reality. What you really are, what you truly are, is your spiritual part of yourself, which is this Atman. It's connected to Brahman, and every living creature, most Hindus believe, have this Atman within them. So this links this idea of life after death because the Atman is what it gets reincarnated in the life after death cycle. So when we look at life after death, we are considering the idea of karma, moksha, samsara. Those are three key concepts that we are considering. So if you have a look at the picture on the screen here, this shows the general concept of life after death in Hinduism. So the idea is that you are born, you die, and then you are reborn or reincarnated. And this cycle of being born, reborn, and so on is known as samsara. That's the name of the cycle. The aim for all Hindus is to achieve moksha. Moksha is the point at which you are released from samsara and you become one with Brahman. And as I've said previously, the thing that gets reincarnated is your Atman, your soul, based on your dharma, doing your duty, and based on karma, which is your kind of good work. So if you do something, you follow your duty, you're a good person, you get good karma, then that will improve your reincarnation in the future. So that is the overview, it's a general idea of Hindu beliefs about life after death. Related to this idea of karma, we can now move on to have a look at the idea of suffering and free will. So this is considering why we suffer and how Hindus might choose to respond to that. So some Hindus would argue that the reason why people suffer is because of this bad karma gained in our previous lives. And that's the reason why suffering occurs, but also because of our own or others' poor choices. So for many Hindus, what they'd argue is to break free of suffering, to remove themselves from suffering, they need to achieve good karma. They might also argue that in response to seeing others suffer, that it's important as part of your duty, also known as your dharma, to relieve the suffering of others. And many Hindus will try and follow the teaching of ahimsa, which means to avoid harm, as part of this. In addition to that, there is this idea of knowledge and ignorance, which is mentioned on the specification. So this is the idea that as well as reducing suffering through doing your duty and gaining good karma, another part of freeing yourself from suffering is realizing that the only thing that is real and true is what is spiritual, and that everything else is an illusion. And this links back to the ideas we looked at in part 1 of the videos of Hindus beliefs, where we considered this idea of matter and Maya and so on. So these two ideas are connected. So if you are ignorant of this fact, so if you are focused on the material rather than the spiritual, then that will increase your suffering and also the suffering of others. So then we come on to this idea of free will and the question of whether we have free will. So this is quite a complicated idea, and you'll find a wide range of opinions within Hinduism. But many Hindus will believe in the idea of fate and free will. So the idea here is that your previous karma will determine things like your personality, where you're born, your situation in life, and what we're likely to do. So that part is kind of fated. However, the choices that we make within that, the choices that we face, are made freely, so we do have free will, and those will affect our karma that we gain and will affect our future. So those two ideas kind of go hand in hand. So there is an idea that we are determined in some way, there is some form of fate caused by our past karma, but that we also have choices that will then affect our future karma. Again, just to reiterate the points made earlier, many Hindus will argue that it's important to tackle suffering, particularly when you look at moral evil, so evil caused by humans, and they do believe that people should act in kindness, that they should treat other living creatures with consideration, and that it's part of our duty to challenge suffering. And there is a quote on the slide here, which is from Gandhi, which brings out some of these ideas. And then the last part of this is to look at the idea of natural evil and natural disasters. So some Hindus might consider natural disasters as a consequence of humanity's bad actions, so how we treated the planet, again a kind of collective karma there. Others might just argue that suffering is part of life in terms of natural disasters, and that through that kind of suffering you can gain good karma by helping others, so that's part of life. There is a slightly divergent view, so a smaller number of people who might believe this, but some would argue that natural disasters are part of what's known as a play of the gods. So beyond human understanding, it's part of God's plans or part of what God has in mind for human beings. We're now going to move on to have a look at the aims of life within Hinduism, the idea of personal virtues, and then we're going to come on to have a look at the idea of Dharma. So there are 4 key aims of life, and it's really important that you can remember what these 4 are. So we've got Dharma, which we've already mentioned quite a few times, really central to Hinduism, the idea of doing your duty. Moksha, so the aim is to achieve moksha, which again is that freedom from the samsara, freedom from the cycle of being born, dying and reborn. We've then got Artha, which is earning money through honest means. And lastly, we have Kama, which means enjoying life responsibly. And really important not to get that confused with karma. They are 2 separate and different ideas. In addition to the aims of life, there is also the idea in Hinduism of personal virtues. So these are virtues that Hindus should try and aim for, try and live their life in this particular way. So there are quite a few of these, and there are some examples on the screen. So things like ahimsa, which we've mentioned before, so avoiding harm, respecting other people, showing empathy, having control of your mind, so that means kind of being kind of restrained and thinking carefully about things, having humility and showing love. So these are the kind of qualities or virtues that Hindus might strive towards. So we're now going to have a look at this idea of Dharma, really, really fundamental to Hinduism, and nearly all Hindus would very strongly have this belief in this idea of duty. So as an individual person, there are different duties that you might have, and we're going to have a look at 2 of these types of duties. We're going to have a look at Varnashrama Dharma, which are the duties based on your stage in life, and also your Varna, which is commonly known as caste. And we're also going to have a look at the Sanatan Dharma, which are universal duties that everyone should follow. So here are those key terms in front of you. So obviously when we're looking at the idea of Dharma, we are closely tied to the idea of karma, and again to this idea of reincarnation and samsara and moksha. So all of these ideas are very, very much connected. We're going to have a look at Varnashrama Dharma first, and we're going to have a look at the idea of Varna, which is more commonly known as the idea of the caste system. Now, within the Hindu tradition, there's always been some aspect of this system. However, it has altered and changed over time. The fundamental idea of it is that people are divided based on their karma and dharma, which is decided at birth, and that each caste, each group has a particular set of duties that they should be striving to complete. Now, within the Rig Veda, which is a Hindu text, there is a description of society, and it's described as a human body. And you have these 4 castes that you can see on the screen in front of you, described in terms of the roles, the duties, the kind of positions that might be held by these individuals within society. Now, it's important to note that the Varna system has changed over time, and there have been many controversies and issues and problems linked to it in the past, particularly linked to discrimination and how people are treated. And the way that Varna is approached will vary greatly from Hindu to Hindu. It will be very different depending on their outlook on the system. So although the Rig Veda describes society in this way, how that has been understood and how that's implemented and how it works in society really, really varies. Now, the second part of Varnashrama Dharma is to look at the Shram part. So this is someone's duties based on the stage in life where they are at. And there are 4 stages. The first stage is the student stage, where the person is expected to focus on education, to prepare for their future life, and to read, study the texts, learn good values, learn good behaviour. The second stage then is the household stage, where the emphasis on really getting married, owning a home, having children, getting a job, that kind of thing. Then you move on to the retired stage, when after children might have left home, the person can then start to focus on more religious aspects of their life and perhaps going on pilgrimage, perhaps having a think about more religion more often. And then finally, we have the renouncer stage, which is where the person is solely focused on achieving moksha, focusing on God. Again, that might involve pilgrimages to particular places. It might be separating themselves from other people and having this sole focus on achieving moksha. So here we have some useful quotes, all of which are from the Bhagavad Gita, which focus on this idea of duty and dharma. So we have this idea that you should follow your duty, the duty to which you were born into, and that you should do your own duty, and it's much better to do your own duty than to try and do someone else's duty. So these are quite useful quotes to be able to use, for example, in a 5-mark question or in a 12-mark question to be able to support your points. So our final part of Dharma is to have a look at the Sanatan Dharma. So many Hindus will refer to their religion as Sanatan Dharma rather than Hinduism. And the phrase, the term itself, means eternal law. And essentially what it means is to live your life in a way that you are thinking about the choices that you are making, and you are trying to live your life in the best possible way and make the best possible decisions. Now, Sanatana Dharma is universal. It applies to everyone. It's not specific to your stage in life, nor to your caste. So Sanatana Dharma can consider a number of different things, but on the screen here you have a selection of the kind of things that it might include. So things, for example, as remembering God in your heart, trying to reach moksha, doing worship, caring for plants and trees, showing respect to elders. So these are some of the things that might be included in the Sanatana Dharma. And this is quite a useful idea to refer to if you are thinking about using Hinduism and perhaps in the thematic papers. You can refer to some of these ideas as a teaching, as a belief. So that concludes the teachings for Hindu beliefs, and that includes everything that is on the specification. Here you have some other key terms that are really important to make sure that you are happy with these and that you understand what they mean and will be able to use them if you were asked about them. And so to finish off, just to have another look at this part of the specification. So we have covered all of these different ideas in the video today. So check off and make sure that you're happy with each of those concepts, each of those ideas, and again, looking at the key terms there to make sure that you would be able to answer a question on those key terms.